And let's say hi to our friends out in virtual land for joining us this afternoon. This is the 6th session of a 9-session program that started in September. And this is in connection with Repro Shabbat, which was last Friday night. And this is an extension of that. And so we're welcoming today Tanya Nawrocki and Molly Rose Lewis with Rabbi Ben, and they're going to be talking about reproductive rights. Just so you know, this program, thanks to the Temple Sinai Board of Directors for sanctioning it, and to Rabbi Ben for being our David Letterman of the hour, and to Michael Gordon for our live stream in the back of the house. And at the conclusion of this presentation, we'll have Q&A and then something to nosh on in the lobby. So please join us then. And with that, I'll turn it over to Rabbi Ben.
All right. Thank you very much, Jill. Thank you both for being here. I'll throw it to both of you. You can pick which order you want to answer in. Our opening question we always ask everybody is, say, I met you at Sinai. What brought you to Sinai for the first time?
You want me to go?
Yes, please.
Okay. Well, I have been a part of Sinai for, I think we're going on like 6 years now. So during COVID, I approached Rabbi Ben and Rabbi Sarah and said, hey, I found out I have Jewish heritage, and they were amazing and led me through the conversion process. So I'm super happy to be here. The reason why I chose Sinai over other options in the area is I was really impressed by the social justice work that the rabbis and the temple has done. That's always how I have lived my life, and that has really aligns with my values. And I'm so glad that I can be here and continue that with my community.
And I think I'm an unofficial Sinai member. I hang out sometimes. I am Jewish on my dad's side. I'm more in the ethnic, cultural sense of rather than being super religious personally. But I think I actually first encountered Sinai with Rabbi Sarah because when I was working with Reno, goes back to the Repro stuff, she came to work with us and testify on some bills that we were working on at the legislature. So that was my first connection, and then just making friends in the community and being kind of somewhat involved, like with the Purim spiel and things like that.
Wonderful. Well, always glad to have both of you for all these things. Before we get, you've teased the little bits that we're getting to, but I wonder if you could share a little bit more about sort of your backgrounds and where you grew up, and if it was somewhere not Reno, how you ended up in our fair city.
I mean, I'm happy to go, but this could literally take the entire hour.
We can always have you back.
Try to give the short version. I grew up in the Bay Area, in East Bay, Oakland, and Orinda. And so, you probably were like, yes, you probably know people.
It's always good when you mention semi-local places. You shout it out.
Semi-local, right?
Reno, hello. Yeah.
Exactly. So I grew up there. I lived a lot of different places, everywhere from Hawaii to Europe. I'm an Italian citizen also, Connecticut, Illinois, all over the place. Wound up in Reno in 2016, actually, to do political work, sort of semi-randomly, but also hilariously Sinai-related. This is a funny little tidbit. Shout out if you're listening, Jeremy Cohen. He and I used to do theater together back on Maui when we both lived there. So I know Jeremy and Alan from Maui and doing community theater there. They were like my adopted Jewish family on the island because my mom lived there, but my dad and brother still live in the Bay Area. Anyway, when I was looking for what I should do because I wanted to get involved politically in 2016, he was living in Reno and was working on the campaign stuff and was like, come to Reno. It's a good place to come do the work. And that's basically how I wound up in Reno in 2016 to work on and I'm happy to say this, anti-Trump campaign. It was Hillary and everything, but for me, it was just the whoever it was, not him.
Yeah.
And then wound up staying and doing lots of different things, like working reproductive rights and with the legislature and now Senator Rosen's office and stuff. So that's my short-ish version.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
It's a lot.
Then we'll definitely have to have you back to get the full story. All right.
And I think that's how we've met,
I
right?
think so
Through your
too.
work. And I know I should remember that.
No,
but I
it's
feel like
okay.
I've known you for so long
I
now.
know.
So I grew up in Massachusetts. I was born in the Natick area, and then grew up in Worcester throughout high school. So my activist background is a little bit different. I started pretty young and was informed by, I guess, personal experiences, but also seeing a lot of inequities around me. Mostly when I was younger, it was class inequity, which you see still in the Boston and Natick area to this day, but also a lot of racism, frankly, as well. So I think growing up around that is how I started getting into this work as an adult. I've been in Reno for a while now, about 16 years. And when I came here at that time, I was more interested in environmental activism in relations to class and race. And I really started getting more interested in reproductive justice and access. Probably around the same time that you came here, 2016. I mean, it was always important to me, but just seeing our political landscape change really drastically and seeing this access be threatened is how I started doing that work here. So yeah, I've been here for a while now. I'm currently working at the university in the Department of Gender, Race, and Identity. And I'm also able to teach these things to students. So that's how I try to stay active as we're navigating these changes, which I'm sure you're also struggling to deal with as well.
Yeah.
So.
Well, so I know there are people who are watching and who are saying, "Oh, I would like to. I feel very strongly about this, that, or the other thing, but I'm not really sure how to do it, how to make that." How did you both get into advocacy and those sorts of things?
I mean, it's sort of interesting. I grew up with very, liberal, politically involved parents, but was never particularly doing anything myself. I was more in the theater space, but I will say part of what I kind of grew disillusioned with the theater world that I was in, because I felt like it was kind of just preaching to the choir, like the people who were going to see the shows with like, we're not really doing anything. And I always felt like I wanted to do more. And in a roundabout way, it's going to sound silly, but I was living in Europe in that time, and I wound up in England visiting a friend the day of the Brexit vote.
Oh.
It was one of those things everyone's like, that's not going to happen. Don't worry about it. Like, that's crazy. And woke up there, staying at a friend's house, and it had happened. And I know, this may sound odd, but I really felt like I had this kind of moment where I felt the universe, my ancestors, and everyone talking to me and telling me, hey, wake up, you need to get involved. Because a lot of the rhetoric was very similar to, things that were happening with Trump and MAGA and all of that. And it was all similar. There were a lot of similarities to things like, World War II and Hitler and everything else. And I really felt like especially my Jewish ancestors were telling me like, hey, you're supposed to do something here. You're not just supposed to go vagabonding around Europe like you have been for the last few years. You need to get involved. And I was like, well, what do you do? What does one do to get involved? So apparently you become an organizer on a campaign if you want a job and you want something, so that's how I kind of jumped in. And that's why I wound up in Reno, because it was, swing county, swing state, not far from where my family was still living. But I had never done anything political before. I'd never even knocked on a door. I mean, I had maybe done, I think I went to some marches growing up with my parents, but I just dove in, and then that was that. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay. Yes.
I think there are a lot of ways to get involved. I really like how Molly Rose is so active in the community, which like aligns with your political work. I personally have faced some barriers in political spheres. I think you might relate to this, kind of like being in these spaces where you just feel frustrated and it's like, why aren't we getting more done? I have also felt that in mutual aid groups and groups of people with similar interests. So it can be difficult, but I think that there are still a variety of ways. I mean, one thing that I've done is, because I benefited from abortion access in like 2018 or 2019, I really just talked to people, and people have asked me like, what did you do with this? And how did you handle that? And just help people get access to resources. So I think word of mouth is really powerful. And from there, you can just do a lot of organizing at the community levels. So one thing that I did was open a lactation quiet space at my workplace. And I try to be as like subversive as possible without getting fired. And people know that they can go there for period products, for free books and literature for their kids. When I'm able to access it, I put Plan B in there. So I think just really building the community from the ground up is a great place to start. But I also realize that can be scary and intimidating, especially if you don't know where to start. So I think just looking for like-minded organizations and spaces. I always point people to the Radical Cat bookstore to start. They're a feminist bookstore. They basically offer like a nonprofit here in Reno. I don't always agree with their political stances on some things, but they certainly can lead people in the right direction. And then, of course, contacting people like Molly Rose or others. She's also been a great contact with me recently, hooking me up with a local group that ended up not working out.
I was going to ask, actually.
Because of the politics around this right now. But yeah, I think just talking to people is really a good place to start and seeing where it leads you.
I know I sort of answered like my start, but not the other question that you asked, which was like, what should you do if you want to get involved? Which is, I love that you do, Tanya. Like you're just like, I'm just going to do things on my own and make it happen, which I like think is amazing. I feel like I've taken like in some ways the easier route where it's like, okay, I'm going to like be sheltered by these organizations or campaigns or an organization that has some structure to it to like give me a place to go. And I think some people like that, right? Like wanting to have that structure where you volunteer with a specific campaign, or you have an organizer who can like lead you through everything. And that was sort of my role, was like, oh, if you're interested, like then I will explain exactly what you need to do, right? These are the steps you need to take. So I think I think it's cool that there's the different kind of sides of things. If you want to get more, if for people who want to get more involved, you can contact someone who's like, will lead you through the steps, or you can be like, I just want to do a thing, and then, do it.
Yeah. I mean, and as you know, there's pros and cons to both.
It all goes together too.
I mean, more formal organizations, frankly, like access to funding is huge. It's hard to do things without funds. And of course, you can always kind of crowdfund, and be very DIY, but sometimes it really just isn't sustainable. But it can be, but I think everyone's kind of facing various pressures. And we see how political organizations, but also laws and policies become very important, because we've seen in the last few years that grassroots organizing has, basically just been upended in a lot of ways because of these larger structures. So to me, I think that they really complement each other, and we need people in both and even maybe third spaces to get this work done.
Well said.
Yeah. Well, and it strikes me that both of the paths that you've outlined don't necessarily require a big leap, right? That Tanya, in your case, that some of it was just, oh, I see a need, I'm going to do this, or some of it was just talking with people, right? That we often forget how important it is to just make connections, and sometimes by sharing our experiences or our concerns or our hopes, will help people understand what it is we're trying to do and can lead us in other ways, or help give us a sense of what we need to do. Or on the other hand, if we're someone who says, that's not me, I'm not anywhere on the subversive spectrum, but to say, oh, but there is a group of people who share this value with me, and someone has done the groundwork. So maybe they started with the little thing and it's built in, and I can go in and they can then tell me, hey, this is what I need, and I can say I can do that. And I think that under both of those, or the third one, as you said, yet to be designed and to change the world, are things that are very manageable, and it, that we don't have to have all of the answers or all of the pieces when we see something. That there's a lot that leads up to that. So we've got to leave something for other people to do.
Right. Well, I love how you just said you don't need to know you don't have to have all the answers or all the pieces to get involved. And I think a lot of us are stopped by that feeling of, I need to know exactly all the rules. I need to know all the details. I need to know exactly what to do before I do anything. So yeah. I think that's a really good point. It's just and you said too, just talking to people. And I think we all need to do that a little more, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that connecting with people and finding out what we share and how we align does more than anything else for understanding, for creating community, for finding ways to peace. And it seems so simple, but we forget that, and sometimes get distracted from that because the other voices are so loud and tell us that we shouldn't do that. And maybe that's why they're telling us, because we know that sort of thing can only lead to good things. So we're here to talk about, we're celebrating, I think, yes, we're doing a full week of Repro Shabbat and then some. I mean, there's no it's not the kind of thing that only applies once a year. So if I can ask, and I know this is sometimes something that's very personal, and I if it's something that is not what you want to share with our live studio audience, but I'm interested in how you got into reproductive work, what drew you to that in particular.
Yeah. I'm happy to start if you want. I think, I mean, for me, growing up, with, boomer parents and just people who were involved in the days of, pre-Roe and work, in the time of Roe v. Wade and who know the before times and the after times and the difference that it made. And all of my parents' friends and everything, I kind of grew up with this sense of understanding of what that meant. And then for me, seeing the kind of, honestly, seeing the writing on the wall with the Supreme Court changing and the possibility of that falling and what would come after, just made me want to get more involved in that. And, it wasn't necessarily personal in the sense that I had not had an abortion at that time. But that was sort of my lead in. And for me, it's just really about bodily autonomy. And it's about, it goes along with the oppression of women and the patriarchy and all of those things that have plagued our society for so long. But importantly, you know, what do you have if you don't have your control over your own body and what you do with it? And that was what kind of got me into that space. And then, you know, speaking more about things like access, you know, it goes along with it. You know, when you think of reproductive rights, like, yes, we often use that term to sort of be talking about abortion, but it's more than that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's access to birth control, it's access to sex ed, it's access to, and things that like we worked on with NARAL, which is now called Reproductive Freedom for All, which is the organization I worked with for a few years. We also worked on things like paid parental leave, paid sick leave, paid anything, because it's not just about whether you don't want children, it's about if you do want children, how do you parent them in this society? And I think that's part of the conversation that gets left maybe a little bit behind. And then I wound up having, I went through several years of fertility struggles. And that really, it didn't at all change my like, oh, no one should ever have, you know, it was more the opposite of wow, you know, people who want children, you still often have to go through a lot, including I had to wind up, you know, and I'm happy to share this, take the medication abortion pill when I had a non-viable pregnancy, which was a very wanted pregnancy. You know, we had been going through rounds of IUI and money and effort and emotions and physical everything. And I did have to use the medication abortion pill. And a lot of people say, oh, that just sounds so nice and easy. Let me tell you, it's not.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure, you know, we fight a lot for access to those things when we do the work around like the political side, but it is not a pleasant experience. It was really awful, honestly. And it's so, you know, the argument, it just made me remember the arguments that folks on the kind of the other side of wanting to suppress people's rights to these things like to use it, like, oh, there are people who are using it as birth control, or just it's nonchalant. It's not any of those things. Mm-hmm. And I mean, I remember even when I went to the pharmacy to pick up the prescription, you know, kind of feeling really awkward about it and wondering what the pharmacists and the pharmacy techs were thinking when they saw me, and, you know, knowing, and I, you know, it's not their place to ask and it's not my place to have to explain myself. But I remember having this whole experience of like, I wanted to tell them like, guys, it's not that I don't want this pregnancy. Like I want a baby, and this is a non-viable pregnancy, and I have to get rid of it in order to potentially have a child in the future. And it was interesting for me, having spent several years actually fighting for on the political side for this access before I actually wound up needing it myself. And now I'm not doing quite as much actively in that space, but it really just sort of cemented all of the things that I had been working on more of a conceptual level without having experienced it myself. Yeah. But you know, I will say I was able to have a child, and he's amazing. And but then now it's the other side of things where it's like, how do you parent in this society where there's not a lot of access? You know, it depends on where you work, and what do you do when there's a snow day, and what are you supposed to do when you're supposed to work too? I mean, I think that's part of the conversation too that needs to be had, but I'll stop talking now. So.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm glad that you said that reproductive justice is multifaceted, because I do feel like in the public and political spheres, the conversation is really binary and limited to like pro-life or pro-choice, but it's so much more than that. It's about access, no matter what the choice you make. So like Molly Rose, my experience is also multifaceted. I would say maybe flipped though.
Yeah.
So as I had mentioned, I grew up or was born outside of the Boston area, and pretty quickly entered the foster care system. So that was where I learned, you know, before I could articulate it, of course, that lack of support for parents and children manifests itself to lead to a lot of like inequities and issues. So I think if like my parents were supported in a variety of ways, what that could have looked like for me, my siblings, for them. And, unfortunately, these lack of services has led to a lot of issues. So I see how they're intertwined. So to me, reproductive justice is also connected to housing justice. Like, how can you house yourself and your family, which I experienced firsthand, not having access to housing. To me, it's also directly linked to food justice. If you can't feed yourself and your family, what does that look like for reproductive rights? And it's also really closely, I think, linked to prison and incarceration justice as well, because when we think about the way that access to abortion is being criminalized now, but also thinking about pregnant women who are incarcerated, what that looks like for them and their families. And all of these have touched my life. Most of my family members have been incarcerated, homeless, etc. So to me, that these are all like issues that are intertwined and inform each other. So I think with the political parts, my goal is to talk about access. And if we have, I feel torn because in some ways I feel like the politics are failing us, and we see how funds and nonprofits or whatever types of organizations have been set up have just been gutted recently. So I really think that mutual aid and community building is important, but I also think that policy is really important as well. And if we have policies that address these issues, I certainly think that is important and helps. So by being involved, especially more actively in the past few years, with organizations like the National Council of Jewish Women, who sponsors Repro Shabbat, but others, because they also have limitations as well, quite frankly. I think my goal is to also just expand my work. And as Molly Rose said, as you enter different phases of your life, you kind of see oh, here are the gaps, here are the needs. And kind of like we said earlier, I don't know if there's ever something that will address all of it. But I think just being multifaceted and flexible to me is pretty important.
Thank you. I'm reminded that I don't know if it's still snappy Jewish wisdom, or if it's become disseminated enough that it starts to feel like a cliche, but from Rabbi Tarfon, who said, "It's not for us to finish the work, neither are we free to desist from it." Mm-hmm. Which I think again sort of ties back to the sort of earlier bits, that we don't have to have all of the answers, but we have a part to play. I appreciated in listening to your answers that and getting kind of an appreciation that not only is reproductive justice and reproductive rights more than just the abortion thing, and that it also that it touches on all sorts of things. And I think there's a lot of people who might say, oh, this is not something that is important to me, or for any number of reasons. But they may, at the same time, be very committed to racial justice or economic justice or climate justice or some other sort of thing, and understanding that these things don't exist in isolation. I think is important for people to understand, and certainly for getting involved and being a part of whatever sort of this thing that is this. Ideally, this is one of those tides that will raise all ships.
Mm-hmm. Well said. I like that. I think it's also what you mentioned too, and you mentioned those terms, pro-life, pro-choice, and I feel like we're so past that binary that, but people still, that is still in the cultural kind of zeitgeist of the people still use those terms, and it means nothing at this point, because anyone who understands reproductive rights would say it's not pro-life to tell someone what they can and can't do with their body. That's just nonsense. And most people and the term pro-choice has also gotten like kind of wonk, people just like think it means just pro-abortion, but it literally means pro-choice. And if you talk to pretty much everyone, I mean, not literally everyone, but the vast majority of people, if you actually have the conversation about what is reproductive rights, what is your thoughts on like what people should be able to do with their bodies, or pretty much everyone is pro-choice. It's just like the terminology needs to move away from I personally try not to use them just because I think I'm just mentioning because you did mention it, and it is still something that people talk about, but it's like it's so much more than that.
Yeah, and they miss a lot. I mean, I'm pretty critical of the pro-choice camp as well because, I was a young parent. I had twins when I was 21, and, being active in these leftist spaces, I didn't feel supported as a parent all the time. And it was really, really frustrating. So,
to make the choice of saying yes to having children.
Exactly. So in these leftist spaces, I didn't feel very supportive or supported. And then, of course, the people who say like pro-life, well, I never, had help or access to services while I was raising my children, which is why I made the choice to have an abortion later on, because I was like, I cannot do this again. It really is broad and nuanced.
And random tidbit, most abortions in this country are had by moms, by people who already have children. Mm-hmm. That is an interesting little nugget there. Yeah. Most abortions are folks who already have children and don't feel like they can support another one or go through that physically again.
Yeah, I think it's like 60-something%.
Mm-hmm. More than half.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow, all this nuance. It was so much easier when I just had this very, very black and white, good guy, bad guy view of everything, and now you're blowing my mind. What's a rabbi to do? So I, as a rabbi, have to ask if there are points or pieces where you see this work and this subject dovetailing with Judaism and our either our values or our practices.
You should talk about Repro Shabbat more, maybe.
I mean, as I've told you all, I didn't really get in touch with my Jewish identity until I was an adult. So I'm still learning a lot. But one thing I thought was really awesome and interesting is that abortion access is permitted under Jewish law. And, when I first started learning more about Judaism and it had been described to me as like a religion of laws, I was like, ooh, that's a little scary and weird. And I'm not sure how I feel about that. Of course, my understanding has far since expanded since then. But when I learned that it was a law and learned more about it and what the Torah portion says, that's when I became more interested in the connection to Judaism, thinking about assimilation and, quite frankly, the links between Christian and white supremacy and how that operates culturally in the United States, but also other places. I really think about power and control in that struggle there. And for me, the relationship to Judaism is kind of to push back against that. I mean, there's, this understanding and notion that that we're a melting pot and everyone can, live how they want to, not just with reproductive rights, but also the way that they worship and live culturally or how they want to make choices. So when those are taken away from people who might not align with the dominant thought, that becomes really important to me. And this work is, a reclamation of those ancestral values that I lost in my lifetime. So that's been really important to me.
not sure I have much to add. I feel like I actually, and I'll say specifically because I learned about some of this from Tanya and from Rabbi Sarah. I don't know that I have much more to add, but I remember because I participated in the Repro Shabbat a couple of years ago. And I remember I wanted to do some more research too. So that was my entree into learning more about how it jives with Judaism. But I'll just say this too. I think it's really interesting that if a lot of interpretations of even the Christian Bible, in the New Testament and things, I've spoken to like some pastors who are like, no, if you actually read what it really says, like this is also still permissible, and where life begins and ends is an interesting conversation that I think it isn't just Judaism that actually permits it. It's just like this one idea that some people have taken, especially in the Christian community, to try to pick it out and get it as something to use as a rallying point for people for political ends. So and I think it comes back to that same point where like in Judaism and in so many other religions and in so many other actual human experiences, this is something that it's universal, and it's just been like, picked out as something that's a rallying cry and a point to like rally people around politically to get certain people elected. And that's just my feeling on it. So
yeah, I agree with that. And I think why I've been focusing on it as a Jewish value more recently is because this ideology is framed as a religious issue. So I think knowing when and how to make those counter arguments has become really important as we kind of like operate in different spheres. And it's really just like arming myself and like understanding how I can argue it in this way, because it is difficult when I think you come face to face with a person who believes that they're making the moral choice, and it's like, how do you argue with that? I still don't know that I have the answers, but if they do want to pose it as a religious belief, I think it's important to say, well, hey, here are some other viewpoints and things that you might consider. Of course, I frankly don't think it will solve anything, but I think if it can get a few people to pause and rethink, maybe that will help.
I think there's a sort of a tension between wanting to say, hey, why don't we all just kind of hold our values to ourselves when we need, so that they don't kind of overlap or conflict with one another, knowing that if somebody else doesn't choose to abide by that, they're going to steamroll everyone. But the other option seems to say, well, then I'm going to be myself as loudly and as obnoxiously as I can, because that's what they're doing. And I'm not getting pushed aside, but I'm also increasing the volume, and it's hard to then rein that in and say, well, wait, now let's how do we have a conversation about this? I don't know if either of you have ever encountered anything like that in your respective work.
Yeah, the tensions. I feel that in my personal life, in my scholarly work all the time. And it's, I think, something that I'm not really resisting anymore, but kind of leaning into. It's been weird for me the last few years, kind of leaning more into Judaism as a religion, where at first I was like, yeah, I can be like a cultural Jew, but it's become like more important to me as a religion. But there are like tensions there, because I've just associated religion with like, I don't know, problematic behavior for so long. And yeah, it is tricky. I don't know if you have more thoughts about the tensions.
I feel like that's I have similar, I still honestly, like I said, I'm only an unofficial sort of semi-member of of Sinai. So I think I still push against that the trappings of religion and that idea. But I'm still working on that myself. What does that look like for me and raising a kid, and what are the choices that we make around that? I just had a thought. I'm not going to talk about too much, but circumcision just popped into my brain as a topic that is actually kind of related. But we won't go there today. But that's another whole fraught.
Yeah,
I think that's a whole other conversation. That's
Yeah.
And
I saw some headline about it, but it was behind a paywall and whatever.
Right,
Whatever
so-
news I saw, I can't. It was something
Yeah.
going on in the world about that. But yeah, that's.
that goes along, and we talk about reproductive rights a lot in terms of the female side of things, I think, because there is so much anti-female autonomy in that conversation. But that's another whole conversation that I think at some point needs to be kind of more reckoned with, I would say. And I feel like that's one of those like tension points, right? But I do think your point too, in like, do we get louder about it, or do we just say let's just let the crazies yell and maybe not talk about that even more? And that's a great question, because you don't hear a lot, and I don't think in the media or anything else about how access to things like abortion are permissible in Judaism, and that's not really part of the conversation. Even though it's true,
Right.
I think that's partly with the Repro Shabbat and everything, trying to sort of get that a little bit more into the cultural understanding. And I think it's interesting that it's not as well known as I think it could be.
Yeah, it's definitely not. In the last few years, when I've been active in doing this, I always have a number of people who are not from the Jewish community but have participated come up to me after and say, I had no idea, because that like dominant voice is just so prevalent. And I think it changes people's ideas. I'm not sure how that looks for them in the long term, but it does challenge people, and there are those tensions. And then it becomes more complicated in like our current conversations and understandings about Judaism. And really, I just like the interruption of thought and comfort. I just think interrupting that is really, really important.
Well, so I will add in that that one of the things that in the last say 25 to 50 years, that where we have particularly in Judaism, although we're seeing it in wider fields, adding in more voices, and that we can look through thousands of years of Jewish tradition, and women's voices are not as prevalent, and which is deeply problematic, because women were there from day one, and we don't have their experiences. But we've had much more scholarship coming out, which has helped not only for these sorts of issues, but for everything that. But Rabbi Tanya, America's favorite rabbi, has written a great deal on reproductive rights. I know that she has, and a lot of the materials from NCJW, her things are there. But if people are interested, she did a short program with Samantha Bee a number of years ago. You can find the clip online. I guess they went to a bar, and it's the two of them. There's also a woman from the Muslim community, not having alcohol, of course, but sitting down. There may have been another person, but talking about a lot of these things in this kind of informal setting. I think is a really good resource if people are looking for just, what's a quick way I can kind of can get a little bit of this going on, and that it's something that's accessible, and it's not that. There are plenty of Jewish texts that talk about this, but not everyone is willing to dig through and translate the commentaries and cross-reference it with how it fits in with Talmud and all those sorts of things. But fortunately, we are starting to get more that we can work with, and that we have opportunities like this to discuss it and raise it. We also have something else coming up that I wanted to have a few minutes left before we turn it over to our folks for questions. But we are into Adar, which means Purim, And not only does that mean that you should all come out next Sunday to here at Temple Sinai at 7 o'clock for the Purim Spiel, where Molly Rose and I, among others, will be dazzling everyone in our production of the Purim Spiel, told with the music from Chicago. But that's also a story that talks about bodily autonomy, talks about sexual freedom, and I didn't prep you ahead of time that, hey, I'm going to bring this sort of thing up, but I just, if you have any thoughts on that or reactions on that, but that it's not as though, oh, we found this one thing in the Torah, now we can give women something to focus on for one Shabbat, and then we can go back to important man things. But the dignity of every human being is something that is a constant, and that there are multiple times when it speaks to all sorts of different experiences, including ones that speak to these sorts of issues.
I'm not sure I have anything to add. I think that's great. It's a good point. I don't know.
I think the story is really cool, and it's something I need to learn more about. But from what I know, when I did my conversion, I don't know if you remember, you asked what my favorite holiday was, and I was like, yeah, Purim, I guess. After thinking about it, because it's so fun. But yeah, when you look at the story, I was like, oh wow, this is really amazing. And I hate to be kind of negative, but I've also seen the story embraced by Christian groups that have become like anti-sex work, and they use the Queen Esther story to justify that. So I think that's a pretty interesting aspect as well, and how when we talk about these stories, they can be reframed. So for that reason, it's why I need to learn more about it. So when I go to some of these things for research, I can be like, this is what's not right here.
Yeah. And that's another whole piece of the puzzle, like, you
Yeah.
know, sex work.
Yeah.
I think that's especially interesting in Nevada. I mean, that's not the question you asked, but
Right, no.
but now that you mention it, I'm just going to say I think that's a really interesting piece of the puzzle too, in terms of bodily autonomy conversations and choice that you make with your, you know, how much. I just really thought it was cool. I'm just going to say this because I thought it was really cool to finally hear about one of the brothels unionizing, because it's something that I remember talking about like several years ago. And like, why aren't there more unionized brothels? Because there should be. Like, let's talk about this as a labor choice, you know, and how you talk about what is labor. You know, you're still the fact that you know, traditionally, let's just say men who use their bodies to build something, you are still using your body. It is a use of your body in the same way that, you know, it's not the same way, but it is a use of your body that is being exploited for labor, and, you know, whether you're being paid properly or not properly, and it's still part of the conversation. So sex
or like the military is
and
like
the
a really
military,
interesting
exactly.
example.
Well said.
So yeah, I think that they're all connected.
Sex work's a whole other conversation that can be had.
Sure. No, that's
Yeah.
part two. But that's I certainly appreciate bringing that in, and that I think that something that is an important takeaway is that, particularly with these teachings and these texts that are ours, that we need to be mindful of that, because there are people who will use them not for the ends that they were designed, not in the spirit, and not for the community that they were designed to protect, but they can twist them, and there's some folks are really good at selectively editing the texts and offering the definitive understanding of what it is. And if there's one thing that we know in Judaism, it's that
No such thing.
it doesn't work that way. But what we do know is that any reading of Scripture that does not lead us to being better, more compassionate, more loving and tolerant people is an incorrect reading. And so it is our job to live those values, to show how it works, but also to be mindful of the fact that the words are out there, and doing what we can to safeguard them and to help educate people when they are misled.
Mhm.
So, well, I thank you both. We're gonna call Jill out here to see if we have some questions from our audience and people online. If you are here, I ask, please remember, only speak if you have the microphone. Otherwise, the folks online won't be able to hear you. But go ahead. Yeah, Doug.
Of course, I'm going to have a question.
I know. Love it.
I actually have two. And the first goes, of course, in November, on your advocacy sides and your experiences. Of course, in November, we'll be voting on the reproductive rights, adding it to the Constitution.
Mhm.
How do you respond to the argument that why are we adding it to the Constitution when the current Nevada law was added by referendum and can only be overturned by a vote of the people? That's my first question.
I have a very good answer for that.
Okay,
If
I'll
want
let you
me to-
answer that, then I'll go to the
Okay.
second.
Yeah. So the main reason is that, so what you're referring to, the referendum that people refer to as Question 7 from 1990, it used language that in 1990 made sense. It used the term physician to allow reproductive rights, abortion, access, but it used the term physician. And nowadays we have things like APRNs, nurse practitioners, who also are able to, they potentially can provide those services and especially be able to prescribe the medication abortions. So the issue, the main reason to do this measure, if you're just, if you want to get into the weeds, but from my understanding is that it's a way to allow more access by essentially removing that physician-only language. So that's the main kind of point.
Okay,
there.
I was curious how you
But that's not what, sorry if anyone who's working on this measure, and if I'm saying the wrong thing, I apologize. I'm not directly involved, but I'm just going to say, I don't know that that's like the tagline that they're using, in terms of getting people to get on board with it. And I think part of it is just that it's not in the Constitution. So we need it to be there because then it's even harder to change. But that is
Well, yeah, no, that's that's what I was looking for.
that's more of the
because-
line. That's,
Yeah,
I would say it's not in the Constitution. Let's make sure it is. That's the easy way. If you're looking for like the kind of more nitty gritty, it's really
I was
about
looking for the more nitty gritty.
the physicians only issue.
The other question I have, and you both were touching on it, on how you respond to the dialogue with people who may disagree and how we turn down the temperature. But I'm also curious, how do you deal, and this person's name is public, so I mean, Jason Guanasso is somebody I know. I've had many conversations with Jason, and I disagree with Jason on many things, but I have always found him to be open and genuine in having a rational discussion. So if you have somebody like that, how do you respond to Jason Guanassos of the world and their position on reproductive freedom?
I don't think I'm going to touch that one. This is being recorded.
I can say something. I don't know who this Jason person is, but I can say with my career, I do come in contact mostly with a lot of students and young people who have some serious and important questions about this. And I'll be honest, like sometimes having these conversations can be really like triggering, but also just understanding how ideology works and meeting them with empathy has worked pretty well for me, and getting folks to understand different viewpoints and how this is actually important to their own lives and other issues that we've talked about, whether they choose to engage directly in reproductive justice or not. Like framing it as a broader issue has helped me be successful in having those conversations. On the other hand, though, I mean, there are instances where positionality becomes important, And if I am engaging with a person who has a lot more power than me, and I feel like the conversation is just to belittle me, and I just don't engage. But I would say most of the time people are curious and interested, and especially our young people. I mean, if I were judged for everything I thought when I was like 19 to 25, even just a couple years ago, I would be very sad and horrified. And I think people do want to listen and change their minds. So there are days when I don't feel that positive, but overall, I think that's the way that I approach that.
And I'll just throw in too, I think one of the things that you mentioned is that it can be triggering for a lot of folks who have more of a personal experience with something like that, to have those conversations with someone who you know is not necessarily going to agree with you. So I would say, just someone like you maybe who would have, I'm not sure what your personal experiences have been, but if you have the capacity to have that conversation instead of making someone like maybe Tanya or myself have them, I think that's helpful too. So that's a way to be a good, ally and stuff too.
Mm-hmm.
I'll also say that I have found that approaching with curiosity is often a wonderful way to help facilitate those conversations. And specifically, I remember one time listening to something on the radio with Rabbi Sarah in the car on NPR, and they were talking about a situation where someone had a pregnancy-related issue, and because of their reproductive rights were limited, it was horrible and wrenching. And I said, how can anyone hear this and say it's still not okay to do this? And part of Rabbi Sarah's answer was, well, you should talk to someone who holds those views and try to understand how they make peace with that. And I did that. I said, please, I'm trying to understand, and I want to ask this, and ended up having a really incredible and illuminating conversation. I can't say that it was completely satisfying, that I walked away going, oh, now I get it. But I certainly didn't walk away thinking, oh, well, this person is just obviously unconcerned with the feelings or needs or well-being of this person. It was by willing to and trying to be as upfront and that I was looking to learn something rather than just to defend yourself in this horrible position, you fiend. It went differently.
Well, I'm curious to hear what that was. Answer.
So one of the things one of the things that I was thinking about listening to you both speak and from some conversations I've had with friends and colleagues in a variety of positions and fields and things like that, is a lot of them have very strong personal feelings about a lot of the social justice things that are going on these days. But with the climate being the way it is, they're also prevented by their anxiety about putting a target on themselves. So how do you two deal with that particular element of the fear?
That's a great question. I'll say, like, I feel somewhat protected in some ways right now with what's currently going on. I'm a US citizen, I'm white. And so I don't have that particular anxiety that a lot of people do. And I think, so I need to use that somewhat less anxiety to speak. I should be doing more than I am, I guess, is what I'm saying. Like, those of us, I think we need to let people who need to take the space and not put themselves out on the line to do that, and to try to, like, assuage their guilt, that you don't have to be the one out on the front lines right now. If you are potentially a target of what's going on currently. And I think that's important too, that other people can stand up and should be.
Yeah, I think the fear is very valid. And like Molly Rose said, I have a lot of privilege. I'm extremely secure in my job. So I can do things like this and, stash plan B in my office because I have a supportive department. And it's almost impossible for me to get fired from my job because of my state classification. So, I mean, I'll be honest, I kind of take advantage of that. And yes, I'm also like, I have citizenship. I have a lot of protections. There are other types of fears that are no less valid, but, social acceptance of your peers, what it might look like going against family members, friends, loved ones, anything like that. I tell people if they really want to be active, but they're worried about those types of fears, kind of just do what we've been doing. Maybe listen to things, talk to people, doing very public or visible activism isn't for everyone for different reasons. And I don't think shaming anyone is really helpful. But even if, you just tell someone who's scared, well, don't donate $5 a month to your favorite social justice organization. I mean, hopefully, no one is looking at their bank statements in that situation. There are ways that you can be active and kind of mitigate those fears. But yeah, it's tricky.
I think just to kind of piggyback on what you were saying too, Tanya, a lot of folks just assume that the only thing that is to do is to like go stand at a protest.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just going to say that this is one of my few things I'll say, like as a current staff member of a senator, we don't pay attention to those. That's not actually useful in terms of getting policy changes. We don't care how many people are standing on the sidewalk. We care how many people write a letter. We care how many people call the office with a specific point of view that we can record and count. So making a phone call, having a conversation with someone, and I will say that, living in where we live in Northern Nevada, there's a lot of access to elected officials and their staff, more than most places. And it's actually really easy to have those conversations if they're willing to do that. And that was just my little plug for people not to feel like standing on the street corner is like the only or the best way to accomplish things.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you. Well, and at first I just want to thank you both for willing to be public faces of this discussion today. And, I deeply appreciate, I think statistically 1 in 3 women have an abortion experience in their lives. I got to contribute to mine for a national magazine. But just thank you. I think the more that we can talk about it publicly takes away the stigma around it. And that's as important as anything else. Something that I did hear, and this is just my Temple leadership hat on, is you both mentioned, and this is a kind of a generational split that we're seeing. You mentioned some of the ways that either of you have felt hesitant in the past to be involved in synagogue spaces or organized religion spaces, because regardless of the denomination, there is this history of problematic stances. And so I'm a little curious just how you two have personally squared that circle or not. And, what you would maybe advise synagogue leadership if we want to try to get a younger demographic to recognize the allyship that we think we are. But apparently it seems like we're up against a much bigger messaging problem that's not even of our own creation.
Yeah, I think synagogue participation and membership by young people is experiencing a lot of different pressures. Really only speaking for myself, I haven't been super active because I just feel like I don't know how, and it's like a little embarrassing. And I actually think a lot of younger Jews feel that way because many American Jews haven't grown up religiously. So that's where I notice a lot of folks meeting in these kind of other spaces that I've been participating in. So it's like other Jewish groups that are out of the synagogue. So I would think I would feel more comfortable personally if there were more like partnerships and collaborations between synagogues and temples and those types of groups. But yeah, I don't have a great answer for that, to be honest.
I also think it's a great question, and I haven't squared that circle, or circle that square, or whatever, however it goes. I haven't done that for myself because, like I mentioned, I'm only in sort of unofficial attaché for for the synagogue because I didn't grow up in one. I grew up with not being a part of that, and it didn't seem like something that I was needed to do. But I will say that in the last several years that I've been sort of more involved in the community, I like that sense of community. And I think that is part of what people need is the community factor. And like, that's why, like you said, people are kind of join other things. Like I was more drawn to doing like the young leaders with Jewish Nevada in some, I'm not even young anymore, but I feel like there's that aspect where because it's much more of like out in the community, it's not at the temple space, which I think sometimes can feel a little intimidating as well. Mm-hmm. Whether, you're like, oh, I'm in a place of worship and this is scary. And, it's the 4-wall aspect, and whether, how much can there be more participatory things that maybe don't have that feeling to them. But then, I'm not, and then again, it's not like I'm sitting here right now, right?
Yeah.
But I think that like joining aspect is scary.
And also something I wanted to add real quickly, which I didn't think of at first, but relating this to repro justice. I mean, I'm a single parent. I work 2 to 3 jobs at a time. So I work a weekend job. So it's also just like hard for me to participate. So access is also an issue.
Maybe have childcare. I'm just kidding.
Tanya, can I ask you, you're very involved with the National Council of Jewish Women, and you left literature out front for us also. Can you just speak briefly about that organization, your connection, and Repro Shabbat?
Yeah, I actually wouldn't say I'm super involved with them. It was kind of more self-led, just noticing that they did this every year and just getting in contact with a few people who have been extremely generous with sending those kinds of materials. In the past, we've had banners and all kinds of really cool social media graphics to reach people, which has been awesome to make these events really successful. Beyond that, I'm actually not super involved with them, but they have an Instagram, a website that are easily accessible. I believe they have a chapter in Sacramento, but there's nothing official here in Reno, so it makes kind of ongoing participation difficult. But I think they do a lot of great work. They've been around for a really long time. I think membership is declining, which is kind of sad. So maybe someday there can be a chapter here in Reno. That would be really cool.
Any other questions? Are there any questions online, Michael? No? Okay. Rabbi Ben, did you have any other questions at this point?
No, just thanks to the both of you. Thanks to you, Jill. Thanks to Michael and running the stream.
Yeah.
And
Thanks for having us.
For coming out.
Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
having us.
I just wanted to, I'm from the generation where I remember marching in the street, forgive me,
Yeah.
but
get
for
it.
row, so that they
Yeah.
would pass row,
Mm-hmm.
and how monumental all of that was. And then you just go full circle to where we are now. Just makes you kind of think about it. But you several times used the words bodily autonomy.
Mm-hmm.
I wish we were calling reproductive rights bodily autonomy instead. And then it would not be gender specific, because I think anyone could identify with wanting autonomy over their body. It's just the, it's
Right.
just the we say reproductive rights and it automatically goes abortion, abortion, abortion. And you pointed out at the beginning that it's so much more than that.
Mm-hmm.
and it does cross genders.
Absolutely.
So, yeah, I think I'm going to start using that instead when someone
Great.
asks me a question.
I love it.
Just a reminder that March 8th, we're going to continue the theme of women empowerment and Queen Esther and Purim. And Mary Federico Katz is going to be talking about how we empower women here in Northern Nevada and various organizations that she's been involved with, whose missions are to specifically empower women. So we're going to be thinking about Queen Esther when the Purim spiel starts next week, and we're just going to carry it through the next week. That's March 8th, same time, same place, 1 o'clock to 3 o'clock. And then in April, we're going to be having the director of the Northern Nevada Food Bank. And that'll connect with Passover. And we'll be talking about how we nourish our community. So I just want to thank both of you for your very personal stories and for sharing all of that with us. It was just so generous of you to give of your time and to tell us about your own life stories. So thank you. And Rabbi Ben, thank you as always for being our David Letterman. That just dated me. I probably should be saying,
Right. Jimmy Kimmel.
yeah, except then I'm on YouTube and I'll get in trouble for that. So we'll just leave it at that. Join us for some noshas and have a great afternoon. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.